In mid-2015, the corporate world witnessed the meteoric rise and subsequent decline of Valeant Pharmaceuticals, a company once regarded as the new powerhouse of the pharmaceutical sector. Instead of heavily investing in R&D, research and development, for new drugs, Valeant primarily expanded through aggressive acquisitions and controversial pricing policy, making it the target of harsh criticism from politicians, the media, doctors, and patients. Within months, market confidence plummeted, culminating in regulatory investigation, massive declines in stock value, and ultimately drastic internal restructuring. Below, we explore how Valeant reached its peak, what triggered its collapse, and the lessons learned about governance and transparency in the pharmaceutical industry. Originally, Valeant had its roots in BioVale, a Canadian pharmaceutical specialties company that merged with Valeant in 2010. Under the leadership of J. Michael Pearson, the new corporation adopted a business model focused on expansion through acquisitions rather than internal research and development. The philosophy was simple: acquire other companies, cut costs to the bone, and raise prices on existing market drugs. During this period, Valeant spent billions acquiring smaller or niche-focused pharmaceutical companies, such as dermatology, ophthalmology, and aesthetic medicine. The company believed that by cutting R&D expenses and eliminating redundant infrastructure in acquired companies, it could maximize profit margin. Investors initially applauded this approach. Valeant stock rose steadily, reflecting the belief that the acquisition plus price hikes plus cost-cutting strategy was highly profitable. High-profile Wall Street figures like hedge fund manager Bill Ackman of Pershing Square became strong proponents of Valeant, amassing billion-dollar stakes in the company. Investors viewed Valeant as a new model of pharmaceutical management, seen as more capital efficient. The stock's soaring value seemed to validate this approach. By 2015, Valeant's market capitalization exceeded $80 billion. However, a key part of Valeant's profit model, abrupt price hikes on established drugs, came to light, sparking outrage. In notable cases, medications whose development costs had been recouped years earlier experienced price increases of several 100% within short periods. U.S. politicians and patients accused the company of exploiting the sick, especially for chronic or rare diseases, without offering therapeutic innovation. Media reports highlighted specific cases of drugs whose prices skyrocketed literally overnight. In the U.S. Congress, politicians from both parties began discussing the issue of price abuse, summoning executives to testify at hearings. Meanwhile, the scandal grew, casting doubt on Valeant's profitable yet aggressive business model. The narrative quickly shifted from a success story to corporate greed, and investor confidence faltered. Another critical factor in Valeant's downfall was the revelation of a murky relationship with the online pharmacy Philidor. Valeant had an option to purchase, effectively a veiled ownership, Philidor, raising questions about questionable billing practices and health insurance reimbursement. Reports alleged that Philidor may have employed tactics to steer prescriptions toward Valeant products, even when generics or competitors were available. The complex ownership structure between Valeant and Philidor, not clearly disclosed in official documents, was seen as an attempt to obscure transactions and revenue. This lack of transparency undermined the company's credibility, worrying analysts and shareholders about potential fraudulent practices. Although Valeant denied any wrongdoing, its initial response was slow and ineffective, amplifying the reputational damage. As the controversy escalated, regulators and independent auditors began scrutinizing Valeant's accounts, investigating contracts, reimbursement policy, and the company's actual regulatory risk exposure. There were fears that Valeant might have inflated revenues or manipulated sales data through its network of partner pharmacies. Between mid-2015 and early 2016, Valeant's stock plummeted, at times losing over 80% of its value within a few months. Institutional and retail investors fled, fearing the company was on the verge of default or facing massive lawsuits. Pershing Square, Bill Ackman's fund, suffered billion-dollar losses and began pushing for management changes. Under intense pressure, J. Michael Pearson, the CEO and architect of the aggressive acquisition and pricing strategy, stepped down. The company brought in new executives, including Joseph Papa, formerly of Perrigo, to restore confidence. At the same time, the board of directors was overhauled, bringing in specialists in compliance and governance. However, the loss of credibility was enormous, and Valeant spent months renegotiating debt and revising pricing policies to appease regulators. Due to the high debt resulting from multiple acquisitions, Valeant relied on refinancing and agreements with creditors to maintain operation. The collapse of its stock value triggered debt covenants, raising the risk of default. The company was forced to sell off several secondary assets to raise cash and reduce liabilities, but this also diminished its future growth potential. The Valeant case highlighted the fragility of business models based almost exclusively on acquisitions and price increases instead of genuine R&D. While it lasted, the market was enamored with revenue growth and high margin. However, under the first wave of scrutiny, public and political, the long-term unsustainability became clear. Other pharmaceutical companies with similar approaches reconsidered their strategy, fearing a similar fate. The lack of robust governance, exemplified by opaque transactions with Philidor, demonstrated that a corporate culture overly focused on immediate results can overlook ethics and transparency. This episode reinforced the need for independent boards, rigorous audits, and clear communication with investors about relationships and risk. In the U.S., politicians renewed calls for measures to curb abusive price increases for medication. Although no immediate federal reforms were enacted, the debate over price regulation intensified. Several U.S. states proposed transparency laws for the costs of drug research, development, and commercialization to deter extreme price hikes. Pharmaceutical companies became more concerned with demonstrating clinical value and pricing justification, aware that previously tolerated practices could now attract harsher criticism. The issue of opportunistic drug price increases became a constant topic in public discourse, shaping society's perception of the profit-over-health industry. To distance itself from the stigma, Valeant rebranded as Bosch Health Companies in 2018, reflecting a stronger focus on dermatology, ophthalmology, with Bosch plus Loam, and gastroenterology. The company sold off various divisions, aiming to reduce debt and regain financial stability. Despite the restructuring, Bosch Health, formerly Valeant, continues to face challenges. Investors remain cautious, and many of the sold assets have not returned to its portfolio, reducing the company's market reach. Legal actions are still ongoing, including shareholder lawsuits over the abrupt deterioration of stock value. However, efforts continue to restore confidence, with greater investment in innovation and more balanced pricing strategy. The fall of Valeant Pharmaceuticals in 2015/2016 has become a cautionary tale of how aggressive acquisition and pricing strategies can generate spectacular gains, but also expose companies to massive reputational and solvency risk. More than a simple management failure, the episode laid bare an unsustainable business model when subjected to public and regulatory scrutiny. In the aftermath of this implosion, Valeant, now Bosch Health, has grappled with excessive debt, asset sale, and cultural redefinition to remain viable. The legacy of the Valeant case underscores the importance of transparency, strong governance, and a genuine commitment to innovation in the pharmaceutical industry. In a sector where lives are at stake, practices solely focused on financial returns are likely to face intense scrutiny. From this perspective, Valeant's collapse serves as a lasting warning, both for investors, who should be wary of excessively rapid and opaque growth, and for pharmaceutical companies, which must balance financial returns with social responsibility.